I can imagine somebody hearing this conversation who's maybe like not in a great financial position, and they would be saying something like, "Oh, you poor little rich girl." Have you ever dealt with anything like that? Welcome to Old Money, a show dedicated to helping you build the trust fund you wish you were born with. Ladies who lunch, listen up. Life is not about looking rich. I want you to build a life and a legacy that feels rich in every sense of the word. If you're ready to stack cash, talk shop, and trade insider secrets, you're in the right place. These are the new rules to old money, so let's get after it. Hello, rich girls. Welcome back to Old Money, the podcast for women building the trust funds they wish they were born with. I am your host, Amber Frankusen, and today I have the guest who holds the keys to the thing that you all think you want, right? That amazing mailbox money, that trust fund, that lottery ticket. We're talking about coming into sudden wealth. And our guest today works with clients on the day-to-day challenges that come with sudden wealth through inheritances, trusts, settlements, marriage, lottery, or successful IPO. I'm sure a lot of you know this, that 70% of lottery winners go broke after they win the lottery within a few years. About 90% of inherited wealth is lost by the third generation. And 78% of NFL players and 60% of NBA players are broke within a few years of retirement. Why does this happen? We have so much to discuss today because while we're all sitting at the casino or we're buying the lottery tickets, we're waiting for that crusty old guy to show up at our door with a big ass check. We are unprepared to handle the windfall if it were to come. And that is why I am so excited to introduce you today, Sudden Wealth Coach, Karman.
Hi, guys. I'm Karman. I'm the Sudden Wealth Coach, and I'm so excited to be here today and talk about what I do, who I am, and, just answer some questions that Amber has. So where do you want to get started?
Oh my gosh. Well, I feel like it would be good to start at the beginning. I would love to know if you could take us back to what inspired you to become a sudden wealth coach. And if you've experienced sudden wealth in your life and seen its effects firsthand, can you take us through your story?
Oh, absolutely. So I became a sudden wealth coach because I come from a pretty wealthy family. My grandfather co-built a multi-billion-dollar company. I was born into that, so I was a granddaughter of that, and that's great and everything. So we had the home, he had the home in Palm Beach, and I grew up pretty normal, to be honest with you. Everything was normal. My dad was a business owner. I always knew I was fortunate. I always knew I would come into an inheritance. However, it came suddenly when my grandfather and father passed away when I was 26 years old. They passed away 6 weeks apart from each other. So that made me go from third generation to second generation in my family's wealth. And as you just said, third generation usually doesn't have much money or it's lost by the time it gets to the third generation. So I was well equipped to be the third generation and to learn from my dad. And by 26 years old, I thought, I had the lifestyle down of wealth and what's going to come with it. What are the thoughts going to be and, the processes that go with that. But I got slammed in the face when I became second generation. And with that came imposter syndrome, and I isolated myself, and I had very big money guilt with it because I felt like this money should be my dad's. This isn't supposed to be mine. He didn't get to enjoy it. All these things, even though I knew in the back of my head, my dad would be saying, Kara, it's okay, spend it. This is what it's for. You were built for this and born for this and you're ready for this, but I wasn't. So I started experiencing sudden wealth syndrome pretty bad. And I went into therapy, and that helped me tremendously with guilt and just getting good tools for that. But it didn't help me enough and able to go forward with this money and to be comfortable with it. So then I looked into life coaching and it helped me tremendously. And I loved it so much that I became certified. And then I decided to create Sudden Wealth Coaching because I figured if I had all these problems, and I'm someone that's supposed to be used to it, and I'm supposed to have the best of the best resources, So if I'm going through this and struggling and had to find my footing, so many other people are probably going through this and need help. Yeah. So I decided to be their holding hand and coach them through it.
First of all, I'm so sorry about losing both two figures in your life so quickly. So you're going through grief on top of all of this new responsibility. Was that completely overwhelming for you?
Absolutely. Like I said, When my grandpa died, I knew my dad would be coming into the money and then I would come into the money after him. And to have the transition to be so quickly, it overwhelmed me completely. And I could not deal with the emotions that I didn't even know were going to happen. So, yeah, it threw me off.
And you said one of the emotions that you felt was imposter syndrome. Were you feeling like an imposter? Can you talk more about that?
I felt like an imposter because I got handed a lot of money very quickly that I didn't work for. So then I thought that I had to act like my grandpa who made the money. And that's not who I was at that time. That's not who I am. I was a 26-year-old girl.
Oh, that's so interesting. So how was your grandpa? Like, what were his traits that you tried to like embody?
Oh my God. I've never had that question before, actually. Honestly, I tried to just embody, like, I knew what my finance team was talking about. I knew what the investment team was talking about, and that I knew where the stocks, were supposed to be, my money was supposed to be invested. And instead of asking questions of, hey, I don't know what's going on, can you explain it better? I just kind of leaned on, oh, I should pretend that I'm my grandpa who's a CFO, you know?
Right. Oh my gosh, that's such an interesting reflection. So did that have like negative impacts on your money, on the growth of your money or you? What was the result of that?
I wouldn't say it had negative effects on my money personally because I let my investment team do all of that and make sure that's safe. But for me, oh yeah, it impacted me. I mean, I would say I kind of went 0 to 100 on the personality scale because I didn't
Yeah.
know who I was. Because at 26 years old, when you don't really need to make your money anymore, it's kind of scary and dangerous. You have too many options.
Okay, that's a great point. So like you talked about also imposter syndrome. How did this affect your relationship with your peers, with your friends? Like did you feel changed or separated from them?
I did. I don't think they felt it, but I definitely did. And I didn't really know how to talk about it, even though everyone that I grew up with knew that I came from money of or a family of money. I still didn't really know how to talk about it because when you do inherit this money, the first thing that people tell you to do is don't tell anyone, don't talk about it. So then that kind of festers in you and creates imposter syndrome.
That's actually a really interesting point because I mean, if we look on social media and stuff, all those, if I won the lottery, like I wouldn't tell you, but there would be signs. And like my sign would be I'd had 50 chow chows and like a farm, right? Like, and so that's kind of like the advice I loosely give, even though I'm not qualified to give the advice on that. It's kind of like, as you're coming into a windfall, figuring out what to do with money, like it's probably not wise to go blast that information everywhere, but it probably, there's something in the middle, right, Kara, where you need to tell some people that you can lean on and get support from. Like, how do you advise your clients on that?
I advise them just to start by looking in your inner circle. Who do you trust the most? Because I think that will probably guide you and help you more in the long run than just trusting your investment and finance team. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but if you kind of look at it in a money way, your finance team is making money off your money. So sometimes you're not really comfortable telling them your honest, icky truth, but you would be comfortable telling your mom or someone, that's close to you about it.
Right. I want to just make a quick asterisk too. And there is an episode of Old Money from way long ago where we talk about financial advisors and fiduciaries and the difference between them. Financial advisors typically are making a percentage on your investments, where fiduciaries you can hire on an hourly basis or project basis or flat fee rate. So without getting into that too much, I just wanted to kind of, for our listeners, asterisk that and say, if you are coming into sudden wealth, there's a lot of opportunities for you to get support where people aren't going to be raking off of your money as well. But
Oh,
Kara,
yeah.
I'd love to advance the conversation. Why don't you tell us, let's go like big picture. And by the way, thank you for sharing about your family and your history and your story. I think it's so helpful to set the scene. But tell us some of the ways somebody could come into sudden wealth. What are the ways people could experience a windfall in today's day and age?
Well, first and foremost, it's going to be inheritance, especially right now with the biggest wealth transfer in the next 20 years. So you're going to see that popping up everywhere. Lottery wins, IPO, divorce, athletes, anything like that, that suddenly you come into a big lump sum of money that can change your emotions in the way that you view things.
Okay, so normally we think, oh my gosh, if I came into all this money, it would like solve all my problems. But on the contrary, it might cause a lot of problems. Like, what are some of the problems that it can cause for people?
So the first four most common that I see is self-identity crisis, money guilt, isolation, and imposter syndrome. And those come into play pretty quickly if you are not the one who earned the money, or I should say, if you're not the one that made the money. And then, so self identity crisis would be more based off of that you don't know who you are because you didn't make the money. And a lot of times our identity comes from the money that we make or our careers. So then you're kind of stuck in this middle land of who am I? What do I do? Which can then bleed into money guilt, isolation, and imposter syndrome because, again, you don't know who you are, you didn't make the money, and you don't know how to go forward with such wealth. Do you embody a person who made it on their own? Or do you look inside and figure out who you are? Now you have a spoiled problem of you don't have to work anymore. So you get to figure
Yeah,
out who you are.
right. Oh, that's so interesting. Actually, I mean, I've not had sudden wealth in my life, but I can relate to that when you're saying that. When I quit my last job in corporate, I went from having this important title and salary and all this notoriety around what I did. And I was always so busy and like in demand. And then I left that job and then my phone didn't ring. And I was like, what? Who am I? What am I doing? So I can imagine if you come into a lot of money and you've been working all your life with this big career and now your job might be managing this money or not working anymore, it's like, what are you doing? It probably throws you into tailspin.
Oh, absolutely. Or, just to think about who you are every day. Like you said, you were in the corporate world and you were used to that's who you were, this corporate woman. And then it all of a sudden stopped and you're like, wait, who am I? And,
Right.
you can either take that chance and go build a company and build a new identity around another career, or you can take the chance and look inside and try to figure out your true meaning and, where you are, what aligns with you and things like that. And if you're the lucky person that both those things can come together and you can create fireworks out of it, that's awesome. But a lot of times it's not as easy as it's said.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you add in this layer that we haven't talked about yet that I'd love to dive into with you, which is relationships. Like, obviously, when you come into a lot of money, your relationships are going to change drastically. What are some of the ways that people have experienced like massive relationship changes?
A lot of people feel jealousy or envy from their friends or family because they did have such a leap in their income and their friends and family might not think that they deserve it. So then you kind of get in a weird situation of you don't know how to talk about it. You're on eggshells. Do you talk about it? Because you also don't want to call someone out on your success and you don't want someone to call you out on your success. Does that make sense?
100%.
So it can get a little dicey there. And then when it comes into inheritance and stuff too, it can get dicey there too, because it came from one person. And then you have all of these generations and their siblings and their, grandkids and things like that. So some people think you should spend the money this way, or some people
Mm,
think you should spend the money that way. And then you have your aunt and uncle fighting, or you have your uncle not agreeing with your cousin. And then it kind of gets out of hand. So that can create some relationship and family dynamics there as well. Or there are those situations with mostly like athletes and stuff. Their family dynamics change a lot too because a lot of them don't come from comfortable backgrounds. So when they get this money, they feel like they have to pay for everyone who helped them along the way. And they don't understand that it's okay to say no. And when they
right.
do say no, a lot of times their family members or friends will look at them as like, oh, you're this big shot now, you're successful and you forgot about us. And that's not really what it's about. What it's about is this person is trying to make their money last and they cannot say yes to everything and everyone.
Okay, you've touched on so many great points. Let's start with that last one and work our way backwards. So, if you had an athlete that has just signed a huge deal with NFL, the NBA, MLB, whatever it is, any acronym you can think of, they have this huge paycheck all of a sudden. How do you advise them to start working towards building healthy boundaries with people, but maintaining those relationships?
I would first say you need to get used to being able to say no and utilizing no as a tool, and it's going to protect you. No is just one of those words that we're trained by society to be scared of and to shy away from. But I think in the situation of sudden wealth, it's one of your biggest tools that you need to learn. So I would
Yeah,
start out any athlete by you need to learn no is a tool.
Yeah. And I think one of the things I've been learning this in my own therapy recently too is like, it's okay if people are disappointed in you. You can disappoint people and you will still be okay. And they can be disappointed in you and you can still be okay. And overcoming that emotionally has been a huge challenge for me because I want everybody to like me. I want everybody to be happy. And I can imagine that I would feel similarly like, oh, look at all this money. Like, who can I lavish it on? And that's not a good way to make your money last.
No, absolutely not. And then you can get caught in the sometimes say you came into 5 million and you are acting a certain way, but you don't think that you're acting rich enough. So then you start spending and splurging on your friends because you want them to think that you have 100 million because some reason you're ashamed of the 5 million and then you run
Yeah.
out of money.
That's so true. I mean, like they say, like $1 million isn't what it meant like 10 years ago. Like it doesn't go that far anymore.
No, and another thing with the athletes, like you asked me, no would be the number one thing. And I think a lot of people, not just athletes, but to make your money last, they don't understand taxes and buying
Oh,
a big
yeah.
purchase and taxes like that. So I would say that's probably equal with saying no, is just, talk to people about the taxes. Everyone has heard those stories of they bought a house and then ran out of money.
100%. That is such a great point. We need to come back to like the practical things too. When we're on the relationship topic, when you have people you said they were experiencing jealousy or envy from their friends or family. By the way, are you watching White Lotus right now?
I've watched the first two, but not the last one.
So on this episode or this season of White Lotus, without spoiling anything, there's three characters that are women. And it is the most perfectly executed dynamic at play of like showing the nuances of three women being best friends, like love you. And then they like turn around and like get jealous and talk shit about each other. It's a beautiful piece of television, the way that they put it together. And people that are listening who've watched it will know exactly what I'm talking about. But it's like so 100% if one of your friends in your group all of a sudden comes into money, gets a new job, starts acting different. Everybody has opinions and those relationships change. And the jealousy or the envy, it can cause separation or distance and a change in relationships. Like, what are some ways people can navigate that with their friends, like their peer group? Like, what if I come into a bunch of wealth and I'm like, let's go on a group vacation to a yacht. And my friends are like, I thought we were like on the Club Med budget. You know what I mean? Like, how do you
Yeah.
navigate that?
I would just kind of look at how do you want to handle the situation and what you want the outcome to be. And two, do you need to come down and kind of meet in the middle? Or is this something where you want to do this out of the goodness of your hearts and you just want to bring your friends on a yacht? Or is it one of those situations where you're like, I have money now and I want to do these things, but they don't have the money? Does that make sense? Like you kind of need to look at it and find a middle ground because you don't want to come off as a jerk,
Yeah.
but you also want to be appreciated for the success that you have made without having your friends and family feel bad about where they may be in their life.
Yeah, I think it's like all a balance, right? It's standing on the Bosu ball of money. Like you don't want to overspend on your friends so they think that you're rich, but you don't want to keep going on shitty vacations and staying in a Motel 6 if you can afford to do more and,
Yeah,
treating your friends versus finding something you can all do together, I think is a really interesting balance.
absolutely. And, just have an open and honest, vulnerable conversations with your friends. It maybe one of them isn't comfortable with a private chef in the house. And maybe that's something because they're jealous of something that happened 4 years ago with you. And all you needed to do was just have a simple conversation. A lot of these
So
things we
true.
blame it on money, but it's actually something deep down. And when it comes with family and close friends, I think we can all agree that's 99% the problem.
100%. And what you were saying too about like your uncle and your cousin, like disagreeing on how to do stuff, talk to us about this. I think this is one of the biggest things that comes up is like, what happens when you have friends or family members that are asking to borrow money? Like, how would you tell your clients to evaluate that decision?
Number one, ask yourself if it's okay if it goes south. Are you okay not getting that money back? Because if you're not, then probably don't even go into those waters. It's one of those situations that you really have to be okay if it does go south because that is your family and
Right.
they're not going anywhere.
Yeah. And a lot of times, if you have an expectation that you're going to get paid back and then they don't, that's going to damage the relationship even further. So, especially if it's a family member, I think that's a really good piece of advice. Like, just if somebody asks you to borrow money, nobody's ever borrowing money. Just assume it's a gift.
Oh, 100%.
Kara, let's talk about some of the practical things people need to talk about. You already mentioned this when we were talking about athletes, but taxes, like learn about taxes. On the practical side of everything, we've talked a lot about emotions and identity and relationships. What are some of the practical things people need to figure out?
100% the taxes on it. And what is comfortable for you to live off a year?
So, how would you advise people to go about figuring that out?
I would say find someone that you are comfortable with in your finances and just really work with them and tell them your goals and what you want to achieve in your lifetime and make sure that your values align with everything going forward.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And I think also like finding those people can sometimes be challenging, right? Where do I find somebody that I can trust? Am I going to Yelp? Like, where am I looking for these people?
Oh, well, just go to your lawyer. If you have a lawyer, I would just start by asking them and see if they have a reference for you. And I would also Google who you're going to use and make sure that their company values honor your values as well.
Ooh, that's a good tip. That's actually a huge thing too. Like the power of asking for a referral. It's so like at least it'll get you in the right direction. I'm interviewing right now for a consultant role, like hiring somebody on in my company. And I always get 3 proposals. Like I always at least talk to 3 people, whether I'm hiring for a role or looking for a financial advisor and getting out there and getting, at least 3 people that I can talk to. And then you can at least pick the one that feels the most aligned.
I agree. Just do your homework. And like I said, and you just said, just make sure the values of the company and you align together because that's going to make the biggest thing. If you can trust them, they can
Yeah.
trust you. It's going to be a great relationship.
I love that. So, what are some of the other practical things that people should focus on?
I would just say you would need to really, really understand your taxes and stay away from buying very big things that you necessarily don't need and that you know that you're buying just to show people that you have money.
How do you work with your clients on figuring out what they should be buying or if they're showing off? Like, do you talk about that with them?
I do, because I think at the end of the day, all of us kind of want to be seen in a certain type of light, right? So you're going to buy these things to a point for other people or to a point for yourself. And when you come into sudden wealth and you're struggling with imposter syndrome, self identity crisis, you tend to overspend and buy these things of proving a point to other people and not yourself. So I usually just start with the values again. And, what are your goals? For example, if you're a car person, what does that mean? Do you want the car, for utility purposes or do you want a fast car? You know?
Yeah, that's a great point.
And
Yeah,
then you kind of got to look at what can you afford because you could go buy an Audi, you could go, I don't know, buy a Ford Explorer, you could go buy a Bentley and a Lamborghini. But which one really aligns more with you and what you can do, and which one aligns more with, hey, people are going to think I'm a big shot if I'm driving this.
a
And then
100%.
try to find the difference between them and a good balance. And if we can achieve that, I think you're going to be going forward.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I really like that this kind of goes hand in hand, right? Like you talk about taxes and you talk about affordability and buying things that you don't need. And I think another dimension of that too are all of the hidden costs that come along with buying something. So, and also, like you said, like the taxes for goodness sake. But I think if you talk about buying a house, that's a great example. Like if you come into a $5 million windfall, that doesn't mean that you get to buy a $5 million house because not only do you have to maybe pay taxes depending on how you came across this money or how you received this sudden wealth, you might have to pay gift taxes or estate taxes or whatever might come with it. You might have to pay income taxes. And then you get a house and then you have to pay property taxes and you have to pay maintenance and you have to do all of these other things. So I think a lot of people get this dollar value in their head and then they start thinking about all the things that they could buy that they know the retail price of and they like add them up in their head, right? And they're like, here's all the things I'm going to buy. And as opposed to doing what with the money, whatever it is, whether it's investing it or keeping it safe or saving it, they go and spend it all. And that's why we see so many people whether it's athletes or lottery winners, go broke so quickly after getting all this money.
Yes, you are exactly right. And to feed off of you, other practical things that would come off with that would be, look into your insurance, work with a finance team, get an attorney, learn how to say no, and definitely grieve if your money did come from someone passing away.
Yeah, that's such an important point, like that emotional piece of it, right? Like figuring out, and you dealt with that firsthand of not only am I overwhelmed with this new identity, but like, oh my gosh, I just lost two very important people to me.
Yes, and that's where imposter syndrome and money guilt came into play with me, is because I was grieving so hard. I was having guilt of spending this money because it wasn't mine. And I really was playing the game of, if I just give this money back, can my dad come back?
Oh, yeah.
Then it turns into imposter syndrome because you start thinking of, how would they act with it? Then you try to act like them. And like I said before, my grandfather was my grandfather and my father was my father. And when they died, I was 26-year-old girl that had nothing in common with what those two were doing. So imposter syndrome really did come about and it did not work for me. And I had to find that balance.
I have to say too, like, I'm wondering if, and maybe you didn't experience this, but I can imagine somebody hearing this conversation who's maybe like not in a great financial position and they would be saying something like, oh, you poor little rich girl. Have you ever dealt with anything like that?
Absolutely. And I go immediately into, my grandfather passed away and my dad passed away 6 weeks later. I know these are, champagne problems. However, I am a human
Yeah.
and humans have emotion. And at the end of the day, the bank account really didn't matter in that situation because I was just grieving my father and my father. So to hear someone say, oh, that's such a rich girl problem or champagne problems, it really made me want to isolate even more because people
Right.
didn't want to hear about, the rich girl problem. And that's another reason why I did create sudden wealth coaching, because just like you said, people get called, oh, rich girl problems. And it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of mean.
100%. Not kind of, totally. I totally agree with you. It's like the complete other side of the coin, right? Of like money struggles you can have at any stage of whatever your bank account looks like. And especially when, you add these emotional layers onto it as well, depending on how you came into this wealth. I think the other thing to think about as well is like, there's a whole new skill set that you have to learn. There's a whole new money mindset that you have to take on when you come into sudden wealth. And like you were saying, like all of a sudden you're 26 and you're like, what, in a boardroom with a bunch of lawyers being like, yeah, invest in that, Jeeves. Like, what the hell? You're not supposed to like know how to do that right away. So what is the mindset shift that you had to take on or that you encourage your clients to look at?
You just really need to empower the boss within you and just say, I'm going to go forward and I'm going to do this. But the way to get there is to admit to yourself and to your financial planners and advisors and investment team that you don't know what's going on. It's okay to not know.
Yeah, that's such good advice. Like humility is not going to hurt. How important do you think mindset is in managing sudden wealth?
The most important part of managing wealth, 100%.
Amazing. And there's this like emotional side of it and this financial advisor side of it too. But like when you're working with clients, do you also collaborate with their financial advisors and estate planners and all those other people too? Like, do you work as a team?
I can. Yeah, absolutely. I love to do that. And it actually kind of makes my job easier because then you do know your limitations. If you do get into those problems, like we were talking about before, of your family member asking for money or you want to go invest in something, it's a lot easier for me to work through your emotions, knowing what goals you can actually achieve because you do have this finance team and I'm working with them and I'm talking to them and we can really work it out. If you do want to go spend that luxury yacht vacation on your friends, we now can work together and really find out a path for you to be able to do that in the most smooth way possible.
I love that you said empower the boss within you to go do it because it's kind of like when you get into these situations, like all of a sudden you become the CEO of this money and you need to have that team of people around you, whether it's investment advisors or insurance brokers or therapy, life coaches like you to help you succeed in that. I mean, like I have a team of people that I employ to help me run my business, right? I can't do this alone. I don't know everything. So I think it's really amazing that you can collaborate with people and like play nice in the sandbox, so to speak, to help people have the most success? Because I guess, let me ask you this, Kara, like at the end of the day, like what's the goal of working with people? Like keep the money and like feel better about it? What kind of some of the goals that you define with your clients when you work with them?
So my number one goal is actually kind of circling back to your question of what does mindset play with successfully managing your wealth. My goal is to get you really just on top of the ball of everything going on around your money emotions, because your mind is the reason you make the decisions you make, which bleeds into your finances. So I really just like to keep it all on, rolling together and just be on top of your mindset, because then your money will most likely be able to succeed because you won't be spending it on, I don't want to say stupid things, but little that are just there as a quick fix.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So you help people stay aligned and stay in line with their like moral compass, with their values. And do you help them to kind of like define what those are as well?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Especially if you come into a situation of, say, you just got divorced and, you were handed $18 million and now you want to go spend it on charity, right? Where do you spend it? Where are your values? Where are your morals? What do you do now? So we'll work together and kind of go forward in that type of matter to see where you want to spend your money and why you want to spend it that way. And like we've been talking about this whole conversation, are your values really aligning with what you're doing?
I love that so much. So just kind of like some overview and takeaways, I guess, for our client or for our audience. If somebody was to come into sudden wealth tomorrow, Kara, like what's the first thing they need to do?
Just let it settle in. Just sit there and process it and don't do anything. Just process it, how it came in, how you're feeling, and where you want to go.
How long do you have people sit with it before they do something? What do you say?
That really depends on them, because it depends on how you came into that money and it's going to affect you differently. Like for grief and stuff, that's going to come right away. But for IPO success, that might come 6 months after you've been making this income and you're now looking inside and you're like, wait a second, who am I? I just feel like a hamster on a wheel.
Right. Okay. So interesting. Before I let you go today, let's jump into our rapid fire rich girl questions. Tell us, Kara, what is your favorite place to vacation?
Anywhere with a nice beach and good food.
Oh,
I'm not a
sounds
picky
so
girl.
good. So good. I'm on that same boat with you. Okay. What's the best investment you've ever made?
Myself.
Ooh, tell me what you've invested in.
Life coaching, really, and therapy. And I'm really big on exercising and, going to the sauna and eating healthy and things like that. So that's really the best investment I've made is myself.
Health is wealth. What is your guilty pleasure?
Being in bed by 9 and relaxing with Bravo on.
That's my girl. That's my girl. Oh my gosh. It's so relatable. What is some advice you would give your 21-year-old self?
To buckle down and get real.
Oh, you were about to go through it. Yeah, totally. And then what in your life makes you feel the wealthiest?
My daughter's smile.
Oh, that's so sweet. How old is your daughter?
2 years old.
Oh, I love that. Well, Kara, tell everybody where they can find you, where they can learn more about sudden wealth coaching. Hook us up. What's the status?
So the Instagram is Sudden Wealth Coach. And then tomorrow my website will be live, and that is suddenwealthcoach.com.
Yay, that's
Those
amazing.
are the handles that I have. So I'm very, very excited about that. And feel free to reach out to me, just send me a message, or I don't care. You can send a pigeon to my house.
I love that. Well, thank you for coming on Old Money and sharing all of your wisdom and insight on sudden wealth with our audience. I appreciate you so much. And audience, if you liked this episode, take a screenshot, tag me, tag Kara. We'd love to see you listening. I love you guys. I'll talk to you on the next show. Bye-bye. Feeling rich? I hope so. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Old Money. If you have questions you want answered, email me at oldmoneypodcast@gmail.com or hit us up on social. We are at Old Money Podcast and I am at your service. If this episode spoke to you, inspired you, helped you, if you took a single note, it would mean the world to me if you could please just take a minute to rate and review the podcast. And if you're not doing so already, subscribe. And if you have friends who like getting rich, please share this episode with them, even if it's just on your Instagram story. And I'd love you more than Jeff Bezos loves Amazon Prime. Thank you so much, and I will talk to you on the next episode. Remember, I'm not your lawyer, I'm not your tax professional, and I'm not your financial advisor. The content presented in this podcast is intended to entertain, educate, inspire, and support listeners in their personal and professional development and does not constitute business, financial, or legal advice. In addition to that, this episode may contain paid endorsements and advertisements for products and services.